From the mysteries of the universe to the mysteries of the unknown, this is Mysterious Realms with Mr. Cyber. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Here is your host, Mr. Cyber.
Well, yes. Hello, everyone. This is Elijah, aka Mr. Cyber, and welcome to Mysterious Realms. It is such an honor and a pleasure to be back doing shows for all of you. I know it's been a while. It really has. And if you don't know why it's been a while, take a look back on my previous videos and you'll see why. But we have an awesome show for you today. Today is my pleasure to be interviewing Dr. Scott Taylor, who is the president of the Expanded Awareness Institute. EAI helps people interested in near-death and shared-death experiences explore what that experience means to them and to our culture as a whole. Taylor has served as president and executive director of the Monroe Institute. He has been a trainer for the Monroe Institute since 1985. Wow. He is an expert in the use of binaural beat technology to achieve and hold expanded states of consciousness. Scott's gift is the ability to make the exploration of the non-physical universe accessible to the curious. Scott is the author and voice of 6 best-selling CDs of guided meditations on near-death experiences in his Into the Light series. He is a spiritual teacher, speaker, and researcher on near-death experiences. He has served 2 stints on the board of International Association for Near-Death Studies, which is IANS. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And currently serves as co-MC of their international conventions. Scott's first retirement was a faculty member at South Central College in North Mankato, Minnesota, where he mentored small business owners. He is an accomplished business leader and former CEO, skilled in a broad range of leadership and business issues. His doctorate is in educational leadership from the University of St. Thomas, and his dissertation topic was near-death experiences, discovering and living in unity. Taylor is passionate about ancient sports of curling, having participated in the Olympic trials in 1991. He and his wife make their home in Virginia's beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains. One thing I must tell you is Dr. Scott has had a near-death experience, and it's pretty fascinating. So, without further ado, please welcome Dr. Scott Taylor. Well, welcome to the show, Dr. Scott Taylor.
Elijah, I've been looking forward to this, so thank you for the invite.
Nah, you are very welcome. You're very welcome. I've been excited to actually talk to you. I've read a lot about you and your background, and believe it or not, this type of topic and these subjects are so intriguing and so fascinating to me. And I know our listeners love this stuff as well. And so this is actually in my realm of interest, believe it or not. So just to get going, I want to go all the way back. Where did this all begin for you? This whole journey down this road, because I know a lot of our listeners love, learning about the very beginnings and how this progressed to where it is today. Are you able to give us some backstory on that?
Sure, I'd be glad to. And I appreciate you asking, because I think origin stories are important. And it will, give all of you that are listening out there, will give you more of a sense of who I am and how I come to this work. So it all began in 1981. I was in love with a woman. Her name was Mary Frances Randall, and she and her son had been out sailing on beautiful Lake Washington in southern Minnesota. And on their way home from that outing, they were involved in a horrific car accident and Mary Fran was killed outright. And Nolan, who had just turned 7, sustained a mortal head wound, and it took him 5 days to make his transition. Luckily, we live in southern Minnesota, so the two of them were transported to the Mayo Health System, and they received some of the best care on the planet, for which I am really grateful, and my hats off to all the folks at St. Mary's Hospital. So that 6 days becomes important because Nolan was the eldest grandchild, and Mary Fran was the one of 9 kids. And so what happened then was that all of the family had a chance to come to Rochester and hold vigil for Nolan.
Yeah.
And, think of it, there's all these brothers and sisters and their boyfriends and girlfriends and spouses and uncles and aunts and grandparents and friends and neighbors. And that's just her side of the family. So it was a lot of people who showed up to support Nolan. And because there were so many of us, we decided that we would divvy up the time that we spent with Nolan in his hospital room. It's not a very big room, and so there 2 of us went in for 2 hours at a time, and my shift was from 3 a.m. till 5 a.m. on the morning of the 6th day. And I was there with Janny, who was Mary Fran's oldest sister.
Mm-hmm.
And so Nolan, since the accident, he was in a coma. He never came out of the coma. But the folks on the floor, meaning the nurses on the floor, had told us that it was really important that we go in and talk to him, because even if you're in a coma, sometimes they say the last sense to go is the sense of hearing.
Correct.
So it was important that we that we talked. So we went in and we had his favorite storybook, and we read him stories. We told him his uncles. Oh my God, what they had done that night was about midnight. They had snuck out into the Mayo Health System, and they swiped all the cushions off the couches in the lobby.
What?
And then taking them back up to the waiting room and put them on the floor so that people could actually get some rest.
Yeah.
And because all the chairs were filled, and so it was actually a pretty funny scene. And we're describing all these people higgledy-piggledy on the floor, and just in general telling him about what was going on at the hospital and about his care and who his nurses were, and telephone calls that we'd received, just like you would talk to any 7-year-old that you cared about.
Oh, of course.
So it gets to be about 4:45 in the morning, and Janny, who is a nurse trained in trauma care, she walks to the end of the bed, takes a look at his chart, and then she takes a look up at all the monitors that were surrounding his bed. And, I'm trying to describe the expression on her face, but she just held out her hand to me and said, "Scott, I think it's time we say goodbye." And so we pulled up a couple of chairs next to Nolan's head, and we told him that we were so so very proud of him. He'd been fighting for his life. He'd been fighting, to stay with us and to be with us. But she said, Nolan, if your mother should come, and remembering that Mary Fran died 6 days before.
Correct.
He said, if your mother should come and ask you to go with her, that would be the right thing to do.
Yeah.
That if she comes and says, Nolan, come with me, that you should do that. That would be good. And that will always love you and care for you and be so proud of you. So that took 15 minutes, and then our shift was over, and we went into the waiting room, and the next shift came in. Well, it was about 45 minutes later that the nurse from the floor came in and said, it's time. He started to, he started a downward progression. So all of us in the waiting room got up, and we filed into this little hospital room. And as it turned out, I was one of the last people in the room, and we, it was already 4 or 5 deep around the bed. So we filed into the room, and I don't know, there were 40 of us, 50 of us, or something. I mean, there's a lot of people, and we. So by the time I got there, I mean, it was already 4 or 5 deep around the bed. And so I wound up going over and sitting on the windowsill next to Mary Fran's brother, Willie. And we just waited. And we, there were monitors above his head, and one of them was the heart monitor. And, you could just see his heartbeat, and it was slowing and slowing and slowing, and eventually it flatlined. And when Nolan flatlined, what I experienced was Mary Fran coming across the veil and scooping her son out of his physical body, and they had this exquisite reunion.
Wow.
And I was surprised by that, because I could feel what they were feeling. I could feel this reunion and the emotion that you would expect between a mother and son who have been reunited. And then what surprised me even more was that the two of them then turned to me and came over, embraced me, and then the 3 of us went to the light. And Elijah, I have to tell you, it was like I had stepped into a dimension I didn't even know existed. It was joy, it was ecstasy, it was love, it was unconditional acceptance. It was just this amazing place. And yet at the same time, though, I really had my full attention was on Mary Fran and Nolan, because they were there, and the 3 of us had a chance to we had a chance to affirm our love and affection for each other. We had a chance to say a proper goodbye, if there is such a thing in this situation, because I was at work when the accident happened, so I wasn't anywhere near the car.
Yeah.
And then,
well, so Dr. Scott, that's really fascinating story. I've heard very, other stories very similar to yours, and the question I have is this something that's kind of like a shared death experience? Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's exactly what it is.
So
Yes,
what is that
what it is.
exactly? That's
That's a really good question. So a near-death experience. Let's go there first.
Okay.
Because most people know about that, and that happens, say, like in a car accident. There's such trauma to the physical body that it dies. And then our non-physical body lifts out, goes out and has an adventure in the non-physical world. And then some heroes back in the physical world, call them EMTs or whatever, they do their magic and they reanimate our physical body. And, that's the call for the soul, our non-physical body, to come back in again. And then, you're able to speak about what happened and, describe your adventure. A shared death experience, on the other hand, there's no physical trauma at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was just sitting on a windowsill. Now, granted, I was in a state of grief, but, there's no physical trauma. And yet I had, or anybody who's had the shared death experience, it's like they can tag along. They're invited to
You're like a guest.
Experience that transition. Yeah, they get to experience exactly what's going on with the person who's making their transition. So
that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. So I've talked to people who've actually done most of the common elements of a near-death experience, where they out and they see the guide and they go through the tunnel, they enter the light, there's a reunion with the dead relatives, there's a meeting with a divine being who helps them through the past life review, and then, they get to go to the Healing and Regeneration Center, explore the Crystal City.
Yeah.
These are all common elements of a near-death experience, and somebody who is having a shared death experience gets to do all the same stuff. It's like they have this merged sense of emotion. Difference, of course, is that there's no physical trauma. Take me. I was just sitting on a windowsill.
Yeah, correct.
Oh.
Well, you know what? That's fascinating that you bring that up. Because I've done a lot of interviews with near-death experiencers, and not all the times, but I had quite a few individuals mention to me that when they physically died and left their body, they were accompanied by someone they knew that was alive still, and I always wondered, what was that? And they never really had an answer for that. And I think that's what you're describing right now with that shared death experience, where someone who's not dead or doesn't have any physical trauma is going through the same thing that the person that has the NDE or passes away has. And that's always been brought up, and these other individuals I spoke to have never known. It's like, well, why is this person with me? They're still alive. And that's where the dots are kind of connecting right now for me. That's very fascinating.
So here's something. We now know a lot more about shared death experiences than we did a year ago. A friend of mine, William Peters, did this huge study on shared death experiences and wrote a book called At Heaven's Door, where he publishes all of his results. And one of the things that came up was, people asked the question, well, why did Fred have a shared death experience and not me? I mean, I was in that room with 40 other people. How come 40 people didn't have a shared death experience? We know the answer to that now. And the answer is that there's really three conditions that are present One is that there is a heart connection between the individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there certainly was that heart connection between Mary Fran and I. And Nolan and I had a very special bond in that his father, his biological father, had disavowed any knowledge of his actions and refused to play a part in their life and refused to support them in any way. And so Mary Fran chose to not tell her son who he was, because he was just not present. And so when I came into the picture, Nolan, he's in first grade going into second grade, and he wants a dad like everybody else who's in the first grade.
Correct.
And so we were working on that bond. And, he's a great kid. So, why wouldn't you? So there's a heart connection. That's the first thing. The second thing that's required is that you are in a receptive state, which means, you're not actively grieving. You're not talking to somebody. You're not driving a car. I mean, that would be bad.
Yeah.
So, here I am. I'm just sitting on the windowsill. So, the only thing that I'm doing is, watching the heart monitor and, watching that slowly degrade. So I'm in a receptive state. And the third thing that is required is an invitation from the person who's making the transition. In my case, that would be Nolan, and maybe also Mary Fran, hard to tell.
Yeah.
Maybe just the two of them invite me to share the experience of Nolan's transition. And that becomes, it's a personal invitation. They wanted to share that with me.
Well, it sounds like, because Nolan was very young, and
yes,
my takeaway from it is it would make that transition. This is just what I personally think. Having her and then you with him would bring a sense of peace for him as he makes that transition and that journey forward. That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I can see that.
Yeah, because that bond was so close that you had with her, and especially him as well. And it's those are to me, those are very special moments because they don't happen to everybody. And it's I think individuals like you are given those insights to help someone transition over. I mean, especially someone that young of an age.
I would call it a gift.
Oh, definitely.
It was a gift for the both of us.
Wow. Now,
he gets to share it with me, and I get to understand what's happened to Mary Fran and Nolan.
That's absolutely right. And I'm sure deep down you don't have any worries whatsoever because you know exactly where they are because you got to witness it yourself.
Yeah. No, I never once did I wonder what happened to them. I know exactly. I know where they are and what kind of environment they are, that they're together. And, it's all of that is not a question for me now.
Yeah. So if I can ask you, so after you had this experience, did you have any after effects from this? I mean, did you have any takeaways that profoundly changed you in your life?
A ton of them.
I know it's a pretty big question, Doctor.
let me. The big one. The big one was I was absolutely curious. Some might say even driven to find a way to go back there again. I knew with every soul, every fiber of my being, that if I had done it once, I could do it again. I just had to figure out how. And yeah, it took a long time, and I started out by going to the ancient sacred sites of the world, so went to Stonehenge and Machu Picchu and the pyramids and with the idea that, in these ancient sacred sites, that there was still some magic juju that would, push me over the edge and take me into that place. Well, Elijah, let me tell you, mostly it was crickets. So
really?
Nothing happened. And yeah, it was wonderful vacations, but yeah, not much there.
Yeah.
So, then I started saying, well, okay, that didn't work. How about some, maybe I have to study some more and figure this out. So I went to seminary, and that didn't do it for me. Although I got a degree, it was fascinating, but it wasn't experiential. It was too much in my head. So then, I'm working on meditation skills, and I try out TM, and I try out the Moto religion in Japan, and I did work with the shamans in both North and South America, and then I found the Monroe Institute. And the Monroe Institute has a meditative technique that uses binaural beats. It's incredibly effective, and the short course is that it raises up your vibratory level so that you can match that of the people who are in the non-physical universe. And then they give you the tools and techniques in order to navigate and communicate in that space. And I met Mary Fran, and we communicated. And Nolan is just with me all the time. He's my buddy.
Oh, of course.
So so that was the major thing, was to find a way to be able to be with them and communicate with them again, fully realizing that, they're not in the physical world.
Yeah.
They're really dead.
Yeah.
And that becomes important because I fell in love again, eventually, with my wife, Ann. Our 20th anniversary is coming up, and she's a magnificent woman. I love her to death. She's just amazing. And, so it's important to realize that if you're living in the physical world, you need to be in the physical world, and your joy comes from that. And at the same time, to honor that relationship that did exist between Mary Fran and I, but
yeah.
I'm married and here with Ann.
Yeah.
Do I sound like a bigamist? I don't want to do that.
Well, you know what? So going back to that question I asked you about, like, after effects, the takeaway I'm getting is because, you were traveling, the pyramids, etc. And in a way, there's really no way to feel that, or let me rephrase this. There's really no way to make up for that experience that you had crossing over as well, or taking that journey with Nolan to the other side in that shared death experience. So to me, if it was like you were trying to find something to kind of feel that same way, or to, try to recapture that somehow. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm not so sure it was recapture it,
or to fill that void. I know that's a deep question.
I have to tell you that when I speak about that, it's a really complicated emotional discussion, because at the moment of my greatest grief, I am in my greatest joy.
Correct.
So it's and I can't separate those two. They just are forever merged together in one emotion for me. But
wow.
It was really more about connecting with them and establishing a relationship, and like, Mary friend, where are you? What are you doing now?
Yeah.
And Nolan buddy, what's happening? What
Yeah.
are you doing?
Well, I'm sure they're having a wonderful time that we can't even comprehend.
Yeah.
And it takes joy, because at least, with you and a lot of other people, I'm sure, that have had these experiences, it brings a comfort to you, because, yes, you miss them tremendously, but at the same time, you have an inner peace, because you know where they are, and they're not going through anything, and they're happy. And one day you will be with them again, just like all of us will be with our loved ones again. To me, that seems like it brings some type of inner peace, even though we can't have them here, even though we can't have them here physically, they are still here spiritually, though, with us.
Yeah. And that experience, because I'm at peace with where they are and where they've been. It is just a reminder to live your life in the physical. There is so much wonder and joy that comes out of being here in the physical. It's their admonition to me is to live your life. This is a magnificent place. So find that joy, find that love, find that sense of adventure, whatever.
Doctor, there's one question that I also had. So there's always this back and forth that I read about, and I already know and believe about NDEs, because my father has had them. I know quite a few individuals that had them that were doubters, and they're like, "Oh no, this is completely real," And when you know those close individuals that are straight shooters, and they, you just know the individual, something changed them, and especially with my dad and some other folks. But the topic that always goes on is the science behind NDEs, and are there different or alternative explanations with these. And that's what always gets me, because of course there's science, and everyone talks about the chemicals, etc. But there's no doubt that people have seen what they've seen and have gone through these experiences, and it's not like a dream, it's actual reality that's happening to them. And that they tell me that real life, like us talking right now, is the dream, and the other side is the reality. So what's your take on the science behind the NDEs and these other explanations? I mean, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, I do. There's a couple of things. One is that one of the founders of the International Association for Near-Death Studies, IANDS, IANDS, and they have a terrific website, which is IANDS.org. his name is Dr. Bruce Grayson. He, MD, PhD at the University of Virginia for a long, long time. And his role for the last 40 years has been to take people's suggestions. Near-death experiences is just hypoxia, where the brain is starved of oxygen and it creates hallucinations.
Yeah.
And he goes, that's an interesting premise. Let's go test that. And so he would create an experiment, test it, write it up. And then somebody else would come along and say, no. It's really about the God spot. All right, test that, write it up. Or how about, here's my favorite. It's a memory of your birth experience. Go to the light. And I just love that one. Anyway, just go to the light, kid. So he retired a couple years ago, and upon his retirement, he wrote a book called After, A-F-T-E-R.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a summary of all of the science that backs up what it is, that they have done over 40 years. And the science is rock solid. I mean, near-death experiences are exactly what people are telling you. That we have a non-physical body before we come into this physical universe. Of course, while we're here, we're a spiritual being enjoying a physical experience, and then we exist after our physical body is sloughed off. And so he's written all about that, and it's really terrific stuff. 2 years ago, a guy by the name of Bigelow.
Bigelow.
Bigelow. I'm not remembering his first name. Anyway, he put up a bunch of money, like $1 million or something, and he said, I will divvy out this $1 million to the person who can prove that there is life after death. And he invited people to write papers, and he was going to give the $1 million to the winning paper. Well, a whole bunch of people wrote in, talked about, this is about, the scientific exploration of life after death.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, not like I'm thinking about stuff. This is like you got protocols and what you have happen. Anyway, they wound up not giving away the $1 million to the winner because there were 29 papers that were so good that they had to have awards. So they gave out money to a whole bunch of people.
Wow.
And you can look that up online. These papers are available to anyone who wants. So the Google is something like Bigelow Competition Life After Death. That will get you there.
Bigelow Competition. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, the people who won, these papers are awesome. So all of that is to say, Bruce Grayson, who is like Mr. Scientific Research, has this book called After. It's really good. It's written in layman's language. The Bigelow Competition, Life After Death. They really nail down the science behind near-death experiences and shared death experiences, and they prove quite conclusively that our consciousness is not a product of the brain, the physical brain. It exists before and after we have a physical body.
Mm-hmm.
And ta-da! So I think what's going on now is even more fascinating because since Bigelow, there's been a real shift in the kind of research people are doing. This idea of like, is it real? What happens? That's all been solved now.
But you know what?
I should never say that because there's always something more to learn.
Oh,
But
of course.
what it's about is how do we live with what we know? That becomes the even more fascinating question. Once we know this, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah. Well, you know what? Going back to Bigelow, I actually found it. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely
Well, of course.
right.
What do you think? I was
Wow.
messing with you or what?
Oh no! It's fascinating to me because they wanted to award that one to like one person, but then all these different papers and essays came in, and that they were all just blown away by all of them. So they did end up having to just give out awards. Yeah, because you can't deny it. Especially when there's so many people that have had this experience, and yeah, each person has a different type of experience, but when you put everything together, all the similarities match up 100%. And you can't deny that.
Do.
Like even medical doctors that were deniers and they had near-death experiences of their own, immediately couldn't deny it anymore. And they practiced medicine.
So you talked to Eben Alexander, did you?
Yes, I did talk to Eben Alexander. His story is absolutely amazing because he actually caught a meningitis, and he was changed instantly. He didn't believe none of that until it happened to him. And that's a very fascinating story. If anybody wants to go check out Eben Alexander, that's a fascinating one. They're all it's just absolutely amazing.
Okay, Elijah, I got a story to tell you.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is in the Small World Division. So for 20 years, I was a mentor to small business owners for the state of Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
My office mate was a guy by the name of Rich Bauman. He did what I did, but instead of small business owners, he worked exclusively with dairy farms because we were in southern Minnesota.
Yeah.
Anyway, about a year and a half ago, his wife died unexpectedly. She went to sleep at night, never sick a day in her life, and she passed away in the middle of the night.
Oh, that's awful.
And I mean, they were married, I don't know, 52 years or something. It was a long time.
Yeah.
And we're each other's best friends. And he really had a hard time with her passing. And about 6 months after she made her transition, one night he woke up in the middle of the night and he was, going to go to the bathroom. And as he's walking down the hall towards the bathroom, he looks up and there's Barb standing at the end of the hall. And forgetting for a moment where he was and what had happened, he looked at her and he said, "Barb, I'm so glad to see you. I've had this terrible dream that you had died and left." And she's now walking towards him. They're walking towards each other in the hallway. And she said, "Rich, I did die. But
wow.
They could see that you were having a really hard time. And they said that I could come down and tell you that I'm okay. And that I will be okay and that you'll be okay too." And at this point, they're now together, and she throws her arms around his neck, and they embrace each other. And Rich said, she was wearing, in the trade, it's called corporeal, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's corporeal. She's physical. and wearing her favorite red sweater. And, when they hug, he could feel her body. It was like hugging a real person. And then she dissolved in his arms and left.
Oh my gosh.
So
I got goosebumps from that. Oh my goodness.
Isn't that an amazing story?
That is absolutely amazing, because at the same time, that the permission or whatever that she got gave him the comfort, and I do believe that happens. I really do.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Rich had come out to visit us here in Virginia, and he's sitting on the porch and he's telling Ann and me about what happened between Barb and him, right? And so he finishes his story, and I looked at him and said, Rich, who is they? They said it was okay for her to come down. They saw that you were having trouble. Who is they?
Yeah, who are they?
And he looked at me and he goes, Taylor, my attention was not on that. My attention was with Barb.
Yeah, I wasn't worried about them at that time.
I wasn't doing a doctoral analysis here.
Yeah.
I was hugging my wife.
I wasn't doing a thesis. Wow.
Yeah, all I wanted to do was hug my wife.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right, because that's how strong that love bond was between them. That's all he was focused on. Was his wife.
Well, and that's how it's not dissimilar from what happened to me when Mary Fran and Nolan turned and embraced me. We went to the light. I mean, the light was incredible. It had all these qualities.
Yeah, you know what? And I don't want to.
I didn't care. My attention was on the two of them.
Yeah, so I don't mean to cut you off, Doctor. That is one question I had for you. So you were able to see the light. Were you able to pass through the light, or was there a barrier for you where you could only go so far?
Interesting question. So in near-death experiences and shared death experiences, people who have them typically encounter one of three lights. There's like the white light at the end of the tunnel that we've all heard about.
Correct.
There's a black light where people go to the source of all being before there was time, space, matter. It was like Genesis 2.
Yeah, correct. Exactly. In the beginning.
In the beginning, there was the dark and the deep.
Exactly.
And so you can go there. You can have that experience. And the third one is clear light.
Clear light.
And clear light. And clear light is you don't go anywhere. It's like, so I'm sitting on the windowsill, and part of me is in the room with all the other grieving relatives, but I am also transported into another dimension that is in the same space. That makes any sense?
Oh yeah, it does.
So it's like I'm here and I'm in this altered reality that is in the same spot. So you experience it like everything in the room you realize is made up of light. So this chair I'm sitting on, it would exude its own light. This phone that's in my hand, that would exude its own light. The tables, the desks, the chairs, the other people, everything exudes its own light, and you begin to realize that we're all made up of the same stuff. We're all made up of light, this loving light that is the foundation of the universe. And so it's,
wow.
some people have that experience where there is a transition, like I'm in my physical body, I float out, I go through the tunnel, I've got a guy. Very common. That wasn't my experience. My experience is rarer, this clear light experience. So that's a insightful question because, not everybody has the same experience, and that's okay.
Correct.
The world is a lot more complicated than we thought.
It very much is. And the so are there really a lot of differences between, like, say, the physical and the non-physical universe? In any way, if that question makes sense. And it's kind of a deep question, because when I think of physical universes and non-physical universes, that's like it's kind of a deep question.
Well, it goes back to what you said before, that we're living the dream. The reality is the non-physical universe. That's what's real. And what we're doing here is we're living in a universe that is composed of lower, different kinds of vibrations that, make up trees and rocks and grass and asphalt, and, all the stuff.
Yeah.
But it's what makes that up. That's what's real. And the answer is that it is consciousness. And I would add another word to that and say that it's loving consciousness. That's the foundation of the universe.
Interesting. Man, I tell you what, Doctor, this topic is just absolutely so fascinating, and especially with the knowledge that you have. I mean, I was going through everything with your background. It just boggles my mind, and the dedication that you and other individuals put into this for so many years, including decades. I mean, to me, that's exciting, because you get hands-on with these stories and this research, and to me, that's just absolutely, I personally wish I could do that every day, but I can't. So I admire individuals like you and others that, put their life's work into, these fields of research and study. And that's just absolutely, I mean, I commend you for that. That's just, I think it's amazing. I personally do. And it's I was gifted that experience, from Mary Fran and Nolan, and I was also gifted with the time to be able to pursue this from an academic standpoint. I received my doctorate from the University of St. Thomas in Minnesota. For those of you who don't know, they're Minnesota's largest private university. Yeah.
And that's 7 years of my life, and I studied, wrote, interviewed people who had near-death experiences so that I could talk about them, and I could share with them and everybody about how you can go and visit these stages, these common elements of an NDE, and not have to have physical trauma. Let's face it, that's a really bad plan.
Yeah.
Don't investigate the non-physical universe by having physical trauma.
Hey, so
you can do it through meditation.
Yeah, you know what? And I was wondering about the whole meditation aspect, because you hear a lot about meditating and just getting into that whole conscious field. Why does meditation keep coming up? I mean, are you able to put any reference around that, or give our listeners an understanding about like the importance or what exactly meditation can do?
Meditation keeps coming up because um, it's one way to enter into expanded states of awareness. It also helps train the mind so that you can focus. And so when you enter into these states, you can actually be there for a while, tool around the non-physical universe, practice communicating, practice having, time in this space, and then and certain types of meditation are good for certain types of things, and the kind that I use and advocate has because it's an audio technology that allows us to raise up our vibratory level easily and simply in a way that you can remember it, and it just allows us to be present and have the ability to enter into those same places that near-death experiencers describe.
Yeah.
So you want to meet your guide, you want to go look at the tunnel, you want to go into the light and have a reunion with your dead relatives. Those are all different vibratory states, and you can train yourself to go and do that. So can I do a quick commercial then?
Of course. Go ahead.
So I spent my life figuring out how to enter into the same states that near-death experiencers describe, and I put them onto albums, and I teach people at workshops, and that's all available. All that information is available at neardeathmeditations.com. So it's easy to remember, neardeathmeditations.com. And so the albums, the retreats, the workshops, they're all there.
Yeah, and just to let all of our listeners know, we will have all this information down in the description, so they can get the information for the albums, including all your websites and the links.
Yep.
Because they're all, I tell you what, these are some very fascinating resources, and I think people will get a lot of takeaway from them. And the question I have is regarding this. Is there anything that you can tell us? Because I know that you have classes. Is there anything you can tell us about what we can learn in your classes?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the objective is to be able to do a couple of things. The first one is to be able to raise up your vibratory level, because, if you're in the non-physical universe, you're vibrating at a level higher than we are here in the physical. So, what is that vibratory level, and how do you get there? And, we teach all of that. And then, once you get there, it's like, well, now what? Well, there are tools and techniques for navigating the non-physical universe, and we teach that. So you get to explore this on your own. I think that's incredibly important, because I don't want to supply answers to people. What I want to be is a guide to the non-physical universe, and then, say, okay, if you've got a question about who you are and what you're made up of, and what your life is all about, and those big philosophical questions, well, go ask them. Find this information out for yourself. Test what it is that you find out.
Yeah.
And pretty quickly you'll discover that you have that ability, and you don't have to rely on somebody else's interpretations. You don't have to rely on techniques that don't fit you or come from another culture that you're not familiar with. Or, it's just I think that people who do this work are extraordinarily curious people, that they, just naturally ask questions of themselves. Like, who am I and where am I going? And why is life organized the way it is? This is a crazy place.
Yeah, those are big questions that a lot of people have. Like a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, figure it out for yourself. We'll get you there. And then at the same time, what you'll discover is that, like in my 5.5-day retreat that we do, we make that transition into the non-physical universe like 25 times. And that provides a great sense of peace for people. He said, oh, when I leave my physical body for the last time, I know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I know what it's going to feel like. I know, how to make this transition wonderful for the people who are still left here in the physical world. Like, maybe, Uncle Fred wants to have a shared death experience with me.
No.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
He's always been asking. So you get choices. It just means that you have choices and you don't go into this blind. You get to go knowing what you know. And
that's exactly right.
Great comfort.
Well, you know what?
It's great comfort. Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what? And I think the classes that you have, and including all the guided meditations that you offer, and including all the series, I think that gives a good framework for individuals to understand, more in depth and get the knowledge on, this specific information. So I think what you're offering is a fantastic resource to people, because some people don't know where to begin with this, and they have so many questions, and I believe that you help build that foundation or get that baseline down for people at a place to begin with, and then go from there. And I personally think that's very critical and important, because without something like this, individuals wouldn't know where to start or how to even.
I didn't.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
It's true. I was running around England, freezing my butt off at Stonehenge, and
just trying to find that answer.
I was trying to find that answer. I said, somebody has figured this thing out. I got to figure out a way to figure that out. Well, I did. It was a guy by the name of Bob Monroe. He wrote a book called Journeys Out of the Body. He was the very first person to write a public book about out-of-body experiences.
Yeah, the OBEs.
Yep, he coined that term. And
interesting.
The book is 50 years old now. And am I doing my math right? Yeah, it is. 1971.
Wow.
And it has stood the test of time. And, I went there, learned their techniques, got good at them, I was a trainer with them for 35 years.
Wow.
And then became their executive director, helping them through the pandemic. So that's all good. And in the meantime, essentially what I did was said, okay, I have a set of tools. I have a set of techniques that Bob Monroe teaches. He has a different cosmology than near-death experiencers do. But, if they're exploring the same non-physical universe, but using a different map is the best way I could describe it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so I said, all right, millions and millions of people have had near-death experiences. And like we were talking about before, they are remarkably similar in aggregate. So let's figure out how to get into that energy pattern and teach people how to go there.
Nice.
So that's been my mission in life.
Well, I
And
tell you what,
it's
personally,
way fun.
from me and the listeners, I mean, we really appreciate individuals such as yourself. Because you've dedicated, gosh, your life to this for decades, and it's
Correct.
just and being the president of the Expanded Awareness Institute, that's just an achievement in and of itself, amazing. Because you want to get to the depths of this and to help others. And I find that very valuable. And I know a lot of other people will as well. And that's, yeah, because, doctor, a lot of people, and even this, a lot of people in this world are lost, and they just need some direction in life. And they need,
Yep.
and they just need a starting point. And I know with your resources, they're a fantastic starting point to just, even if it's tiny little baby steps, it's a place to begin. And then you can work your way to that understanding. And
Yep.
I want to tell my listeners, dive into this stuff. This is fantastic stuff that Dr. Scott is actually has dedicated his time and research into. And yeah, I recommend all of you to check out all of his information that we're going to be posting. Yeah, because this is incredible, Doctor. Just all the just all the research into this. And I personally think each year, or maybe every day, there's just more and more information that comes out. Especially with the consciousness being separate from the body and the brain, as what you mentioned earlier, that's pretty much a given. But it's you're just narrowing it down now, and it's but yeah, it's just exciting. It's just
Okay.
yeah.
'Cause I have a suggestion for people,
Yeah, go ahead.
and that is if you're starting out on this journey, it's really helpful to have a non-physical guide, somebody who knows the terrain, knows you, knows what skills you have and which skills need to be developed. And so that's my suggestion. Start with something that allows you to meet your guide. I have an album that does that, but you can, get that information all over the place.
Yeah.
But, these are people who live in the non-physical universe, and they are literally your best friend, and they have your interests at heart. And to be able to develop a relationship, a real friendship that's, kind of back and forth and give and take and kid each other. And, it's so helpful. So when you come to them and say, what I really want to know is how did I organize this life here in the physical? What was that about? How did that work? They can take you to a place where you did that, or to the people that helped you organize the life here in the physical and look after you. They're monitoring your progress. So, guides, start there.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a very important fact, and actually important point. So listeners, if you're listening to the doc, take his advice. It's not me that you want to take this advice from. You want to take it from the expert who's been doing this for decades. But doctor, I just wanted to ask: are there any last things that I've missed? I know there's just so many questions about this, but I know, going through your resources, a lot of the questions will be answered there. Within your CDs and your classes, etc. But I don't know if there was anything else that you would like to mention on here to the listeners.
Yeah, there's one last thing. I had mentioned the importance of meditation. That's a skill that I think will improve your life in all different kinds of ways, not just in this. I happen to like binaural beat meditations, but, go with something that that works for you. And to tell you the truth, I'd find a buddy, and say, hey, how about we keep checking in with each other, or attend a workshop where you find a meditation friend and somebody that can keep you on track and encourage you here in the physical world, so that you can go and meet that friend in the non-physical world who will also encourage you.
Exactly.
So,
you want someone to keep you grounded and focused, because we know if we're doing this on our own, sometimes we can get lost and get off track, and
oh yeah, I got to take out the garbage instead of meditating.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, something came up. No, you need someone to, get the time on your calendar, block that out, and just focus on this. And everything else, everything else is not going anywhere. Just take out a block of time and go through these resources. But Dr. Scott Taylor, it's been an absolute honor speaking with you today. I really appreciate your insight and the knowledge that you bring to the table. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Well, thank you, Elijah. We had fun in our conversation today, and I hope your listeners had fun too.
Oh, of course.
So thank you again for the invitation, and best wishes for everyone that's out there in podcast land.
You bet, Dr. Scott. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Dr. Scott Taylor. Make sure you check out all the references below to all of his resources and all the websites and links that we have provided for you. Fantastic materials, so be sure to check them out. And in the meantime, I am Elijah, and this is Mysterious Realms. Until next time, take care.